October 22nd, 1962, President John F. Kennedy broadcast a special message to the nation from his office in the White House. Here is President Kennedy as he delivered that message, bearing on recent events in Cuba.
Good evening, my fellow citizens. This government, as promised, has maintained the closest surveillance of the Soviet military buildup on the island of Cuba. In the past week, unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island. Acting, therefore, in the defense of our own security and of the entire Western Hemisphere, and under the authority entrusted to me by the Constitution, as endorsed by the resolution of the Congress, I have directed that the following initial steps be taken immediately. First, to halt this offensive buildup, a strict quarantine on all offensive military equipment under shipment to Cuba is being initiated. All ships of any kind bound for Cuba, from whatever nation or port, where they're found to contain cargoes of offensive weapons, be turned back. I have directed the continued and increased close surveillance of Cuba and its military buildup. I have directed the armed forces to prepare for any eventualities. It shall be the policy of this nation to regard any nuclear missile launched from Cuba against any nation in the Western Hemisphere as an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States, requiring a full retaliatory response upon the Soviet Union. The nations of this hemisphere decided long ago against the military presence of outside powers. Our other allies around the world have also been alerted. Under the Charter of the United Nations, we are asking tonight that an emergency meeting of the Security Council be convoked without delay to take action against this latest Soviet threat to world peace. My fellow citizens, let no one doubt that this is a difficult and dangerous effort on which we have set out. No one can foresee precisely what course it will take, or what costs or casualties will be incurred. Many months of sacrifice and self-discipline lie ahead, months in which both our patience and our will be tested, months in which many threats and denunciations will keep us aware of our dangers. But the greatest danger of all would be to do nothing. The path we have chosen for the present is full of hazards, as all paths are. But it is the one most consistent with our character and courage as a nation and our commitments around the world. The cost of freedom is always high, but Americans have always paid it. And one path we shall never choose, and that is the path of surrender or submission. Our goal is not the victory of might, but the vindication of right. Not peace at the expense of freedom, but both peace and freedom here in this hemisphere, and we hope around the world. God willing, that goal will be achieved. Thank you and good night.
First of all, I was a B-52 aircraft commander, crew of 6. The airplane could carry conventional weapons or it could carry nuclear weapons. And at that point, the Russians had about 240 divisions behind the Iron Curtain. And they wanted in the worst way to take Europe. But they were held back by several things. One of them was our intercontinental ballistic missiles, which could reach Russia. And each one of those had what we call hydrogen bombs. And like the one that we were to carry were 1.1 megaton. That's 55 times as powerful as the Nagasaki bomb, which was about 20 kilotons. So that's a whole lot bigger bang. So when I was in the B-52s, we had a 3-week rotation. 1 week was what we called airborne alerts. We flew 2 missions of 24 hours We were loaded with hydrogen bombs, full load of fuel. We would take over, in our case, from Westover Air Force Base, which was 8th Air Force Headquarters in Massachusetts, near Springfield. And we would fly across the Atlantic, and we would circle all around Russia. We'd take up a station, for example, over Nordkapp of Norway, or it could be around the southern, or it could even be in the Mediterranean. Because the Cold War was going on, and it built up into the Cuban Missile Crisis. But this was part of the things that were really tweaking the communists, was the presence of those missiles and the presence of our B-52s and Neptune medium-range ballistic missiles in Turkey, looking right down their throats just a few minutes away. So here we are with hydrogen bombs on board, and we're flying 24 hours, most of the time with only 2 pilots. And we're staying 24 hours in the air. This is what we do for 1 week. And then the next week, we fly 2 training missions. And there'll be 6 to 8 hours. And during those training missions, we'll make radar simulated bomb runs, will be low level, high level, navigation, aerial refueling, all of those things in the B-52. And then the 3rd week, we pull what we call ground alert, which means we're in a mole hole, we called it, bunkers. And outside of the bunkers are B-52s, loaded, cocked, ready to go. We even have zippers on our boots. We're sleeping in our flight suits because we got to get those off in just a few minutes. The klaxon goes off and we run out the airplane and we get a code, and it tells us whether we're going to go or whether we're not going to go. The Bay of Pigs happened, and Castro was willing to let Khrushchev to come in. They brought in about 60,000 troops, by the way, and then the ships started bringing in these missiles. Of course, some of these missiles are pretty big, and they know there are big, long objects on there. And then it got back that the locals were seeing these big, long objects when trucks were going out into remote sites, and they were doing some building back there. They put a U-2 over there, and they got all this evidence. They're right there for everybody to see. Now, all this being presented to the UN is showing that this is a problem. So Kennedy had to make the statement, we can't let this stand, because I think it's about 12 minutes. I mean, Key West is only 90 miles away from Cuba. It's like only 12 minutes to Washington. And these are intermediate missiles that they have. So the Soviets are putting up their air defenses. They've got the Soviet troops there. And also, they were bringing in these medium-range bombers and assembling them down there, and MiG-21 fighters. So they got bombers, fighters, missiles, and troops. It's all building up there. We decide on doing a naval blockade, and we put it right on the line. You've got to stop these ships, or else we're going to take action. And the action was a full-blown invasion. Now, you know that we were the nuclear carriers, the B-52s. So I'll just let you guess what our targets were. We had multiple hydrogen bombs in the bomb bays. So I had been promoted recently to captain, and I was down in Montgomery, Alabama, at Squadron Officer School. This is selected officers for promotion. And so I was down there when all this was going on. So I was recalled. This is the 15th of October through the 28th of October, 1962, when we first got all this information from the U-2, and it was trying to figure out what we wanted to do. So I came back. They gave me a B-52 for 2 hours to make some landings and some maneuvers, because I hadn't flown for a little while. Then I ran in with my crew, and we were pulling ground alert. So we were in the bunkers with the B-52s all ready to go. We got the word on the 28th of October. The klaxon went off, and we went out to the airplanes. And we had the order to fire up the engines and taxi out. And we had a launch time, and we were down to 5 minutes to launch. Now, the launch is not the strike order. We would get the strike order in the air, but the launch was only 5 minutes away when the code came through, and us, the two pilots, and the radar navigator and the navigator down, all four of us, decode in the airplane, and it says stand down. Stand down. Khrushchev and the Soviets had agreed to take out the missiles and the troops and the bombers, and they left some of the fighters, so the MiG-21s. But there was a contingency to that. We didn't want the world to know that we had buckled to remove the Jupiter missiles out of Turkey. To be done 6 months. Those missiles were older and kind of obsolete anyway. So that went, and we agreed not to invade Cuba, and for the things that I said. I'm in my 20s. Those things don't scare me. And I didn't have a feeling of doom. I had a feeling that I was doing my duty and standing in the front line.